All right, this has been an interesting election campaign on many fronts. Interesting characters here. Why was Hernandez such a surprise coming in second? Where did he come from?
Well, he's a construction magnate in Colombia, and he's not a political he's not from the political classes. So I think that's why he's being seen as a surprise entry here and into the second round. But what's really going to be fascinating is to see how the second round plays out. And Gustavo Petro, as you say, is a former guerrilla from the left, but also represents the hopes and aspirations of millions and millions of Colombians who have been suffering. Colombia, for example, just to say, is one of 23 countries in the world seen as a potential food hunger area of serious concern in the world this year, which shows just how serious the situation is there.
Right, so when you have that situation with widespread unemployment and something like, 1 in 6 Colombians in cities are unemployed, issues of rising cost of living, when you look at a former rebel and then a populist right-winger businessman, you could see them both having that appeal. What have they each promised to do for people who are struggling?
I'm a historian. I would put this in a historical context. We have to understand that Colombia has been politically extremely polarized and suffering enormous political violence for at least 75 years since 1948, when the liberal presidential candidate Jorge Eliezer Gaitan was assassinated, and that led to decades of civil war and produced the environment in which the better known civil conflicts of the FARC from the left, and then the paramilitary violence, often sponsored by multinational companies on the right, has emerged. And so that is a huge and historic situation, which goes very far back in time. It's very difficult to unpick. And as you say, we're dealing with a situation in which, as you say, enormous unemployment. I mean, and also during the COVID lockdowns, 3.5 million Colombians entered extreme poverty. These are enormous figures. Colombia is the second most unequal country in Latin America, which is already one of the most unequal continents in the world. So, these are enormous and desperate figures for a lot of the population. I think that's why we've seen actually such a polarized response in the election, and why the outcome is so contested.
So you also had this candidate who was more of a traditional right-wing candidate, represented a coalition. Why would somebody like Hernandez beat him and come in a surprise second when Hernandez is promising things like making sure that every Colombian gets a chance to visit the sea, or closing embassies to fund education, like kind of offbeat promises? Why would he be more of an appeal than the more traditional right-winger?
Well, I think it's a mistake to cast the other candidate as traditional right-winger. He was the inheritor of Ivan Duque, and Duque was not a traditional right-winger. Duque, when he won the previous election, defeated the establishment candidate who was from the traditional right-wing forces, who was the inheritor of the previous president, Juan Manuel Santos. So this was not the traditional right, actually, in Colombia in the first place. And secondly, as you say, Hernandez's promises, do appeal to a certain number of people. I mean, we have to also acknowledge, that in Colombia, it's a very fraught situation, and polling is very fraught. So this is bound to type of outcome that's been reported.
Yeah, I mean, it's just very interesting to see a maverick businessman who is under investigation for graft, which he denies, versus a former rebel. Fascinating situation there. Thanks so much for joining us, Toby.
Thank you very much.